So a quick intro to this. I think Gwen's going to go through a little webinar to kind of explain a couple things that need to be done before we actually do the event in August. There's 2 full days of kind of workshop for cohesive team development in August. It's August 21st and 23rd. And so the questions come up a couple times to this point about why are we doing this? But the meeting announcement went out for the August 21st and 23rd event, and it had a little bit of explanation of where this came from. So I think Gary participated in this a little bit, but only just a couple of us. He and I participated in this thing called the Strategic Action Planning Committee that I think maybe Dean, you're in a couple of those too?
No.
Okay. So last fall that began, and they were looking at a number of goals for both organizations, SASD and Regional SAN, for the future. And so that group broke up into a number of teams. I forget how many teams total, but 7 teams. And there was a whole variety of people that were listed on this PowerPoint that I sent as part of this meeting setup today. Anyway, the bottom line was that team came back and they gave a presentation this spring about the discussion that they had regarding workplace of choice, and they kind of discussed some of their frustrations with feeling somewhat undervalued. And the discussion was kind of specific about the type of dialogue that was generally given by management, communication, if you will, that was making them feel that way. And they wanted to reiterate several times that employees are valued assets and we should treat them as such and invest in them. And so anyway, after that, at that particular meeting with that presentation, I kind of went away feeling a little bit low because, I felt like as if they were talking to me directly. And I thought, well, if this is a number of Regional SAN people participated on a team that was called Workplace of Choice, I go, well, if they're feeling that way, there's probably reasons for why they're feeling that way. And a little bit of introspection occurred at that point. I was considering, well, maybe it's something that we do as a group of managers, just the way we interact with each other, the things we say amongst each other, the things we say in private to our own teams when we're not with each other, that maybe warrants kind of stepping back a little bit and taking a look at it and seeing if maybe there's some just ongoing improvement that we can all individually consider on all those things I just mentioned, so that our rank and file staff that work for us see that we cooperate with each other, therefore maybe they cooperate with each other. And I'm not talking only within their own team, but across the entire O&M organization. Because, we can be a little myopic in a particular team and our specific needs and what we think is our goals and how they support the district. But we might forget, for example, that we're connected to others in one way or another. And I don't just mean the teams that are out there doing real work, quote unquote, but those that are in the administrative groups supporting some of that physical work in the field. So that's kind of where it came from. As part of this, I thought I would kind of explain, I brought this PowerPoint up. This PowerPoint, I'll just quickly go through it, just take a few minutes here. So this was the lead into the recommendations from the team that was called Workplace of Choice. And just go ahead and go to the next one, please. The next one. So I was just kind of saying, as part of the intro to this, that slides number 8 through 15 were kind of their key points. I thought this was kind of an interesting one off the bat because they said the opportunity statement was to ensure our capability to achieve positive results. And they said align management staff on commitment, identify internal and external experts, set annual goals for staff involvement. These are super high level, and I'll talk about an explanation in a minute. Because there was some people that stood up during the meeting and presented on this and added some extra dialogue. This was included in the email that was part of this invitation. I'll read that in a moment. The second one was ensure, go ahead and go to the next one. Accurately understand the current state of our organization. So in this, they were just saying, well, we wanted to get a survey of everybody's opinions and see if we could understand how we're all lined up at the moment. Determine our organizational strengths and needs and enable a method for ongoing employee feedback. So this was all just revolving around somehow collecting information from rank and file staff so they could understand why they're feeling somewhat undervalued or where there's problems and gaps. So this recommendation was to instill transparency and communication and decentralized decision-making. This is a big one because they seem to emphasize decentralized decision-making, making decisions at much lower levels in the organization. So the opportunity was to staff perform their jobs well and make more informed decisions. So again, getting off the centralized decision, I think they felt to make more informed decisions, they should be part of the whatever level groups that are convening to make decisions. So the action was analyze communication challenges at all levels and determine necessary improvements. Again, about communication, right? Explore external and decision-making methods to enhance current approaches. then they got into the whole, feel-good stuff with the recognize and celebrate individual performances, which is important. You want to celebrate all the small victories, but motivate and engage the staff, and I agree with this actually. We should compliment our staffs and ourselves in general if we're making progress on things that we've tried to achieve. And this one didn't happen, but it was discussed heavily. Create a sanitation districts agency university to the opportunity to strengthen the organization. Effectively, this was sort of akin to like employee rotation programs and basically providing career development opportunities for people that want to explore their options for moving up career ladders of different types. Move on. Is that it?
That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And that's
So,
get to
with no further ado, I'm going to just read a little bit of this because there was actually a narration that came during the session that you guys might find interesting. I paraphrased it slightly, but this was the dialogue. It said, the person said, our workplace of choice team met 8 times over the last few months due to numerous conversations we had on how we could create a powerful presentation while also being mindful that our recommendations and actions would be obtainable. As you can see from the slideshow, our team has prioritized their recommendations. Our team feels strongly that the first recommendation, and I added, to align management and staff on commitments, needs to be implemented as it is what will be needed for other recommendations to come to fruition. We, the employees, need to see that we are all, including managers, committed to the goal of workplace of choice. On that point, it's like they never explained what workplace of choice was. So, yeah, I know. So I italicized a few of these saying, this is probably going to be a point where we'll have some debate when we get to the sessions in August and kind of say, what do we think this meant,
There's been a goal success statement earlier in the presentation.
And there it is defined. A workplace of choice is one that values and respects employees, encourages and supports employees, and gives employees a voice. There you go. I was mistaken. So it is defined.
It's still very, very generic and bland, though.
True.
I agree. I can define it now.
Because how do you know your value? What is that is a measure of value? Moving on. Anyway, we are all committed to providing meeting the goal of workplace of choice, which would allow us to move forward and explore options on how to implement our other recommendations. When organizations are so focused on the day-to-day operations, they often lose sight of their employees and the critical role they play in the organization. That was an incomplete sentence. I don't know why they wrote it that way. It's important to remember that our organization is our employees. Employees should be seen as assets, not expenses. Assets are something to invest in. So we, management, should invest in our staff. Invest. So that wasn't, I italicized that too because how shall we invest in our staff? That's a point for debate. Integrity is the glue of any organization. It begins and ends with trust. With that said, we, employees, are trusting you, management, to help us move forward with this goal and make SDA a true workplace of choice. So they went on there to kind of explain what I just went through with you guys. These were some of the generic statements the team used to describe their current state of being and their preferred state of being. They said, we are just getting started and we know there is much work to do, but we feel that our employees are worthy of our efforts. We are grateful for what we have, but we believe that making this organization a workplace of choice will help us achieve our full potential. Thirdly, they said, we see the goal as a process that has no end, just an ever-evolving program that requires time and commitment by all of us to adapt to the ever-changing culture around us. And then finally, they said, we are confident that with all your support, we can be a workplace of choice where employees feel valued, respected, and will be committed to this organization.
Can I ask you a question? We are the O&M group. Why isn't we including engineering, safety, and everybody else? Why are we in here as a smaller group, as a subgroup, and why isn't this, they talk about SDA in there, why is this not being spread out through the organization and bringing the groups together in that fashion?
That's a fair question. I don't know how the other section managers that attended any of that or heard this later in the presentations really reacted to it. Like I said at the beginning, I felt like this whole conversation that came up through the narration and the PowerPoint was directed almost at me. That was a personal feeling about it, okay? So frankly, I can't really affect how other section managers took this information. I can't really do anything about maybe encouraging them to be more cohesive in any manner, either as a cross-dialogue with O&M section or anything else. So I guess in effect, I'm taking the bull by the horns. I'm just going to start with O&M right here, our small group of managers. And just, again, this is just something I wanted to kind of take an introspective look at ourselves and consider what these folks have said. They spent months on this. It seemed like many of the things that they brought forward were strictly related to communication, and apparently the communication that they find most distasteful is apparently what they're perceiving from us and the way we interact with each other.
But
You guys may see it a little
isn't
differently.
it an SDA level though?
It
Yeah,
is.
can
It
I-
did include SASD and regional center.
Maybe I can speak to that. So Glenn is being very proactive because he really wants to make this better and faster. At the same time, there are other administrative things that Rich and I are working through. We're planning to form a workplace of choice committee and inviting you guys will get email. People from SASD and regional center will get an email. The criteria on, self-selection criteria will be established with the directors, so all the departments will be involved. So this group of people will be working with the steering committee, the directors, to focus on some of these recommendations, like launching a survey, how to make communication better and all that. But that's like a higher level and it's really broad. And what Glenn is doing is just to jumpstart it before we get to it.
And I applaud that effort, and I understand that he's only in charge of O&M, but it seems like we're starting in the middle and working both ways. And we all know the only way that it's gonna have effective change is starting at the top and working down. It's not gonna start in the middle and go out. It's gotta start at the top. And this doesn't appear to be a methodical approach to this overall effort right here. It seems like it's a shotgun blast by Mr. Buethel. I understand where he's coming from. I get it. But it sure seems like Prabhakar and Ruben and all the rest of the directors and everybody should start this effort by, disseminating it to the whole group, not in the middle, not one group, not O&M, but the entire district.
So Ruben has nothing to do with this whole session, in fact, except to say that he and Prabhakar and apparently many others went through something similar to this and recently, kind of a 360 type degree assessment of each other. I think some of you may have participated in the surveys because there was a voluntary selection of people that did those surveys about 360. So I mentioned to Ruben that I was going to go ahead and have this done, and he only endorsed it. He said, yeah, I really strongly believe in this, go for it. But he never told me to do this. It's just really my own thing because that SAP feedback it almost seemed too specific, directed back to O&M management. It was hard to swallow, frankly.
When you select your audience, you're going to have a 360 evaluation done. You can make the results turn out the way you want. When you have a random selection of people that are participating in that, you're going to get a truer outcome. And I don't believe, if I select who I want, I guarantee I'm going to look like God. But if I go out to all my staff, I guarantee I'm going to have everything work. So
I don't know about you guys. Some of you may have been through these 360 evaluations before, where you may select the people that can rank you and provide feedback to you.
You shouldn't be allowed to. It should be all your direct reports.
I understand, but if somebody does the 360-degree evaluation of integrity, and I've done it before, I actually selected people that I expected were going to give me maybe not such a good evaluation, as well as those that I thought would. And it was telling. I remember getting the results back and thinking, yeah, okay, well, I wanted to hear those things that were maybe areas for improvement for me. And I appreciated the feedback at the time.
I agree.
I only bring this up is because Ruben and other higher level managers had just gone through this in the last couple of months. So he was completely on board with pursuing this and, occasionally introspectively looking around and seeing where we can keep improving. I feel like I've taken too much of my time on this small agenda. It's okay.
Yeah.
But Gwen, I think you had some things you wanted to follow up on what we should expect in the next few weeks.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much. And I look forward to having this conversation. I will just mention that this is a different tool that doesn't include a 360, but a very interesting conversation about that I hope we can continue with you guys. So just briefly, I am Gwen Volpel with Integris Performance Advisors. I was in government for 27 years, just so you know. So my last job was as an assistant city manager / fill-in public works director at the city of SeaTac, Washington. So I understand a bit about government, and I would say that working with government agencies is kind of my favorite place to be. I'm going to go through these slides really quick in the interest of time, and then leave some time for questions at the end. But I will also make myself available to you after to answer any questions. So with that, real quickly, what we're going to do today is just talk about briefly what overview of the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team model, and then talk about the 2 online assessments that you will take prior to the workshop. So often when we work with teams, when they bring us in, they talk about some of these characteristics of a team that isn't working together very well. Some of you might have felt some of these things, like people who are involved, you're pessimistic, have a lack of trust, maybe blame. And those teams are just a little bit more difficult to get work done within. Sometimes that dysfunction kind of feels like the elephant in the room. People know maybe that things could go better, but no one wants to talk about it. And even if some people are courageous enough to surface issues, sometimes they don't do it as a whole team, or they aren't quite sure how to move forward. So then they just don't know where to start sometimes. On the flip side, a cohesive team, our definition of a cohesive team, they just get things done better. If you've been on one of these teams, you have felt the difference. It just seems easier to get more done with a minimum of interpersonal stress and drama. It's been a particularly important outcome for the leadership teams we work with, and we do work with a lot of leadership teams at the highest levels. Because leadership teams, or management teams, as you guys call yourselves, are by their very nature responsible for collective results, because they share the objectives of the organization, right? So their ability to work together is key, because the ripple effect can be felt throughout the organization, as Glenn stated, when people are working cross-functionally. So let's just briefly talk about this framework, and really just to let you know, this is going to be the model, but the workshop is going to be all about your discussions, figuring out how this model helps inform how your team can work together better. So it's off the shelf in that I come with a package, but it's really not. Every workshop is different based on where the team wants to focus. So the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team is based on Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. This graphic captures the 5 behaviors of pyramid form. It's one that really kind of makes intuitive sense to people. For instance, we know that they need trust, but it takes intentional effort on a team to try to exhibit these kinds of behaviors in a healthy way every day. Even teams that I've worked with that get a lot done, generally get along very well, find things during the workshop that they think they could do a little bit better, and come away with some new understanding of differences in styles that might be getting in the way, some team norms, and then often specific action items. So let's dig into each one of these just a little bit more. The foundation is trust. This is about being transparent with each other. It's about saying, admitting when you make a mistake, asking for help, and it's at the bottom of the pyramid for obvious reasons. You've got to start with a basic trust to do any of these other behaviors a little bit better, a little bit more frequently. For example, sometimes teams feel like they're doing well with the next behavior on the pyramid, which is conflict, but the conflicts they're having are actually damaging trust and leading to other problems like gossiping, because trust is lacking. So let's talk about conflict in this context. You start having healthy conflict once you have that base of trust. And conflict sometimes gives people a real emotional reaction. But we're talking healthy conflict here. We know that conflict happens in the workplace, but the kind of conflict that really helps teams become more productive is around ideas and opinions. So around work. We're not talking about interpersonal conflict, the person who's always stealing your sandwich out of the work refrigerator or whatever it is. We're talking about the kind that gets all the great ideas on the table without people feeling like they can't get engaged in the discussion and just swallow their ideas. It's really having a team that can master that great debate around ideas, because once they do, they're more able to commit. Cohesive teams understand that commitment doesn't mean consensus. Some things require consensus, but a lot of times waiting for consensus will mean you'll end up with a compromise solution that nobody likes, or it just takes too long. So being able to disagree and then get on board with moving forward as a team. Sometimes people will be in team meetings, and you might have experienced this at other workplaces, let's say, where people seem to commit to an idea in a meeting, and then literally as soon as you walk out of the room, it's falling apart. They're saying they don't agree, or all of a sudden they're not delivering on what they agreed to do to move a project or initiative forward. And sometimes, someone gets left holding the bag, and you can imagine what that does to trust. So that brings us to accountability. And this isn't individual accountability or the kind of accountability that happens when your boss holds you accountable for your performance review and your performance measures. This is about teammates committing to hold each other accountable for the things only that they agreed on as a team. So not anything outside of that, just we're in a meeting, we agreed to do this as a team. Now we should be able to say, where's that report you said you'd have on Wednesday if it doesn't show up, without going up and through the boss, which of course, that having this kind of accountability where peers are holding each other accountable is a very high level of cohesive team behavior. It's one of the most difficult for people to embrace, but you can imagine just how much better it will get when teams see this as an acceptable way to deal with an issue, instead of maybe talking around the issue, talking to other people, triangulating the conversation, or going through the boss. Because if you've ever had someone who sat right next to you go and talk to the boss about something you didn't do instead of coming directly to you, that just erodes trust further. So, and then if you can achieve that kind of respectful and productive accountability, it'll be much easier for the whole O&M team to focus on results. So we know you focus on team results, you have things you're getting done every day, but this means sometimes people will have to kind of put aside what they want to do and things they want to see for the good of the whole team. So in teams that do that, we can see these kinds of behaviors resulting. They willingly sacrifice for the team. They're achievement oriented as a team. My favorite example is one manager, she's at King County, Washington, who had a staff member who texted in sick to the group. She let the team know, and by the time she got into the office, they had already decided who was going to pick up which pieces of his work, his meetings, his calls, his reports, whatever, for that day. So that was an amazing display of teamwork where people were really having each other's back to make sure that the work got done. So that's the model. Each behavior to be sustainable and consistent is a choice by each individual team member in every interaction. And I will say that one of the things that I want to help you guys talk about when we meet is not just your team, but how you can start cascading this kind of thinking about team behaviors to your people, your direct report teams. So you really feel like you have something that you can use with them as well to create this better understanding, this shared language about cohesive teams and how they operate. So now briefly, I'll talk about what will happen before we meet in August. So our work will start with 2 online surveys. DISC is one that determines your dominant workplace style. We're all a mix of styles. Some of us are introverts or extroverts. So the first one will be a DISC assessment, and the second will be the 5 behaviors assessment, which is all about your team, things that are good for your team, including the frequency of team behaviors and how you might improve. Together, these are both really short. They will only take about 30 minutes. Some people do it quicker than that, but 30 minutes is kind of on the outside. Here's an example of some of the DISC type questions. I'm sure you guys have done MBTI or other kinds of DISC workplace styles. This is just one that is pretty easy and works well in the context of 5 behaviors. So you'll be asked to rate these statements for how much you agree, from strongly agree to strongly disagree. The reason why this makes sense in this context too is that sometimes style differences get in the way of behaviors, or we don't understand why someone is approaching a conflict, for instance, differently, but that's because they're a lot more comfortable being forceful with their opinions than other people. And having that understanding can help the team have better conversations and debate about ideas once they understand, oh yeah, that person is just kind of more forceful, but I want to give some airtime for this other person in the group because they're not. Next, you'll take the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team assessment. When you take it, you will be focusing on the O&M management team, not your team reports. It includes questions on the frequency of healthy behaviors such as these, voicing your opinions at the risk of causing disagreement. There are 6 statements for each of the 5 behaviors, plus some questions about things that might help the team improve that are really just a jumping off point for the discussion. So questions like these: if people can check all that they like, how would we create more trust on this team? We understand each other's working styles, let go of grudges, etc. So, and again, just a jumping off point to get the discussion going. Teams use these. Sometimes some measure of these end up on what they do, sometimes nothing, but it gives us a jumping off point. The important thing to remember about this assessment is that the results are only reported in the aggregate. Even Integris can go in and pull up how each individual team member answered the team questions. The platform doesn't allow it because what we really want for people is to, recognize that elephant in the room if there are issues, to be able to put those issues out on that table, and that requires confidentiality. So the system does send out reminders because it knows when someone hasn't completed something, but again, the results are confidential. We aren't able to pull those. I will bring the results, the reports from those assessments to the workshop. We are all learning about it at the same time. The first will be your DISC report, which will talk about your dominant style and what that might look like, some of the things that you find important, obviously the introvert extrovert, but it goes beyond that. People who are more interested in analysis, for instance, than others. So that is the first piece, and it helps get the discussion started, especially in the framework of the 5 behaviors. And the next will be the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team assessment. It includes a lot of narrative and tips for how we can have the conversation. It also just shows how the team overall rated the team behaviors that you saw before, as well as the frequency of each of the responses. So you won't just get this. You'll see how many people strongly agree to each statement, how many disagree. Again, not with names, but with numbers, so you can tell if there's a lot of variability. So these reports will help the conversation started on your team. So the first email, will come on July 20th. That will be about the DISC. Now remember, that's the ones about your workplace style. We're asking that you complete it no later than July 31st. That due date will be in the email. If you have any problems, you can obviously let Carmen know or me know. If you have technical problems, there's that email right down there at the bottom. But just look for that integrispa@inscape.epic.com, because sometimes that gets a little lost in the shuffle and people aren't watching for it. It can end up in a spam filter as well. The next one will follow on August 1st. These are done separately because we pull in the results of one into the other, so they're kind of consecutive. So if you need extra time, just let us know. We'll make sure you get a report for the event. So it'll launch on August 1st, and we ask for you to complete it no later than August 17th. So the system will kind of send you reminders if you haven't completed it, so that it doesn't get lost in the shuffle. Again, we know it's summertime, so that people are in and out of the office. So with that is me getting through a whole lot of material in a very short period of time. So I think I actually do have just a few more minutes for questions.
Okay, well, I have a question, Gwen.
Yep.
This is Gwen. Anyway, on the 5 behaviors survey, I'm trying to focus this effort on the management team and not necessarily each manager's interaction with their own team. It's at the expense of taking this survey twice. I guess I would ask you guys to try to think about us as a group, a management team, and answer your questions in that manner. You understand what I mean? I know that's when I wrote some of these emails introducing this topic, I think that's going to be a challenge for us because we do interact at management meetings on a regular basis and all that. And we have supervisor meetings with our own staff. But I think we may have never really thought of ourselves as a management team, that we have to work together too. And the way we act together or work together is sends messages back to our own teams when you see how we act together, right? Does that make sense? You think you guys can do that?
Yes.
That's a weird one. That's kind of a strange perspective, I think, but any thoughts on that, Gwen?
Yeah, and Glenn, that is, so I worked with King County Finance Business Operations, and they they have taken, let's take this assessment as a director's office team, and then let's take it as members of our team of direct reports. So what you're doing, I don't know who was speaking earlier, but about starting with the top level. I know you guys aren't all the top level, but that definitely has happened. And I think it's really good approach. You guys are going to be able to model these behaviors for people.
Well, to be clear, we are the top level within our section. These are all the top level managers in the O&M section. So,
right. It's just not engineering, not the other sections. Yes, I got it. Yep. Sounds
okay.
Good.
Anyway, so I just want to make that clear to everybody. We're just going to take the survey once for the 5 behaviors. So try to think of us as a team and not related to your own team. Again, because we convene, but we all depart and go to our own teams routinely, and it's easier to think about your own team than thinking of us, as a team. All right, I appreciate that. That's all I've got, Gwen. Any other questions? All right, well, I'm kind of looking forward to this. I've taken the DISC test once before, and I think maybe I've changed, actually. I don't want to reveal what I was once, but curious what I am now.
Yeah, sometimes people tell me being in a leadership role changes them. That's funny. Do you want to mention, Glenn, that we talked about me reaching out and seeing if people are going to be willing, maybe just even have a quick 10-minute phone call so that I kind of understand who they are, where they are with the team? Is that, I think.
Sorry about that. I forgot about that. Yeah, Gwen had asked if she maybe could call you guys individually just for a few minutes and just ask a couple questions in preparation for these. Would you guys mind if she did that? All right. Well, we got pretty much a unanimous thumbs up on that, Gwen. So
Okay.
I'll make sure you get the phone. I'll get the phone numbers for these guys over to you, and you can call them.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
And this isn't to Gwen, this is to everybody else in the room. You sure you understand what it is that you're doing here?
Yes.
Why we're doing this?
Hope so.
Because this is a good place to get clarification before we start. Okay?
Is the org chart for Gwen gonna help?
The org chart for who? For Gwen. I guess I can send you an org chart, Gwen, if it helps.
Yeah, that I would be interested in that anyway. So that would be good. I mean, I really like to just get to talk to people for, like I said, just a few minutes. Don't worry, guys. I'm not gonna make it go very long, but that helps me kind of know where you are too in the organization and on your teams.
All right. Hey, Helen, why don't you send her an org chart since you know right where to get it and all.
Just
please.
Yes.
And,
trying to be cohesive, all right?
and Gwen will be the number and all that.
Yeah, I have that. I'll send it to Gwen and maybe I'll see if I can find one with pictures.
Well, I've got it.
Okay.
Thank you, Gwen.
Thank you. I look forward to talking to you.
All right.
Thank you. See you later.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Then let's just kind of lead me.